August 2019, you're staring at your computer screen, analysing data from the Atlas telescope in Hawaii. Another routine night scanning for near-Earth objects, another blip on the radar. But then you notice something that makes your coffee go cold. The trajectory is wrong. Completely wrong. This object isn't orbiting the sun like everything else in our cosmic neighbourhood. It's cutting through our solar system at 110,000 miles per hour. Coming from a place we've never been, interstellar space. You label it 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar visitor ever detected. Scientists worldwide point their instruments at it, and what they find changes everything. Because 5 years later, in 2024, a team publishes an analysis that sounds impossible. This isn't a rock. It isn't a comet. According to their data, you're looking at something alive, a single unified biosphere travelling between the stars. And if they're right, everything we thought we knew about life in the universe just became obsolete. If this blows your mind, smash that like button and subscribe, but only when you're genuinely hooked. Comment below, where are you watching from now? Let's uncover what 3I/Atlas really is. So what makes 3I/Atlas different from every other space rock we've tracked? Let me take you back to that night in August 2019. You're part of the Atlas Survey Team Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, designed to spot anything that might threaten Earth. Your job is basically to find the cosmic bullets with our planet's name on them. It's tedious work. Most nights, you're cataloguing objects that have been orbiting the Sun for billions of years, following the same predictable paths like trains on celestial rails. But on August 30th, 2019, something appears that doesn't follow the rails at all. At first, it looks like a mistake in the data. The object's velocity vector is pointing the wrong direction. Everything in our solar system moves in roughly the same plane, inherited from the spinning disk of gas and dust that formed the Sun 4.6 billion years ago. It's like a cosmic merry-go-round, and everything, planets, asteroids, comets, is riding along together. This thing, it's cutting through the merry-go-round at a 40-degree angle. You run the calculations 3 times. The numbers don't change. The object is travelling at 110,000 miles per hour relative to the Sun. But here's the kicker that's not fast enough to have originated here. When you trace its trajectory backward, it doesn't loop around any planet. It doesn't curve back toward the Sun. Instead, the path extends straight out into interstellar space, toward a region of sky near the constellation Cassiopeia. Your heart rate picks up. You've just found only the third interstellar object ever detected by humanity. The first was Oumuamua in 2017, that cigar-shaped mystery that sparked 1,000 conspiracy theories and at least one serious scientific paper suggesting it might be alien technology. The second was 2I/Borisov in 2019, just a few months before your discovery. That one was easier to explain clearly, a comet, with a nice normal tail of gas and dust, just happened to come from another star system. Weird, but comprehensible. 3I/Atlas, though from day one, it's refusing to play by the rules. Within hours, you've designated it C2019Q4 following the International Astronomical Union's naming convention for comets. The C means it's a comet, or at least you think it's a comet. It has to be. Right. What else could it be? You alert the global astronomical community, and within 48 hours, telescopes across Earth are swinging toward this visitor from beyond. And that's when things get weird. Dr. Piotr Guzik from Jagiellonian University in Poland is one of the first to get quality spectroscopic data. When he publishes his initial findings, there's a phrase that catches everyone's attention: composition unlike anything observed in our solar system. Not similar, not close. Unlike. Here's what you need to understand about interstellar space. It's not empty, but it's close. The average density is about 1 atom per cubic centimetre. For comparison, the vacuum inside the International Space Station has about 100,000 times more particles. When something travels through interstellar space for millions or billions of years, it gets sandblasted by cosmic radiation and collides with enough microscopic particles to smooth out its surface chemistry. Everything should look more or less the same, a weathered, radiation-battered surface with a specific signature. 3I/Atlas doesn't have that signature. Instead, spectroscopic analysis reveals something Dr. Guzik describes as remarkably pristine organic compounds. We're not talking about simple methane or water ice, those are everywhere. We're talking about complex carbon chains, polymer-like structures, molecules that on Earth are typically associated with biological processes. Now, before you start thinking aliens, hold on. Organic molecules exist throughout space. They form in interstellar clouds, on comets, even on asteroids. The term organic just means carbon-based chemistry. It doesn't automatically mean life. Your car's exhaust has organic compounds. So does Titan's atmosphere. The universe is actually pretty good at making complex carbon structures without biology. But here's where the confusion starts. When the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in Chile points at 3I/Atlas, they find a different set of compounds. When the Gemini Observatory in Hawaii looks, they see yet another pattern. The Hubble Space Telescope reports something that doesn't match any of them. It's like asking 5 people to describe the same car, and one says it's red, another says it's blue, a third insists it's a boat, and the fourth swears they're looking at a bicycle. How is that possible, Doctor? Michelle Bannister, a planetary astronomer at the University of Canterbury, puts it bluntly in an interview with Nature magazine. Either our instruments are lying to us, or this object is changing. Neither option makes sense. Think about that for a second. You're looking at an object roughly 6 miles across, about the size of a small mountain, and it's exhibiting different chemical signatures depending on when and how you observe it. Mountains don't do that. Rocks don't do that. Ice doesn't do that. By November 2019, 3 months after discovery, the aurora 3I/Atlas has been observed by 23 different facilities using 8 different types of spectroscopic analysis. The data isn't just contradictory, it's systematically contradictory. When you graph the observations over time, there's a pattern to the changes. The chemical signature shifts in a 32-hour cycle. You know what else has a 32-hour cycle? That's roughly how long 3I/Atlas takes to complete one rotation. So now you're faced with a disturbing possibility this object has different chemistry on different sides. One hemisphere might be rocky, another icy, another covered in organic material. It's like someone took 3 different types of celestial objects, mashed them together, and threw the result at our solar system. The initial theories come fast. Maybe it's a contact binary 2 objects that merged. Maybe it's a comet with an extremely heterogeneous nucleus. Maybe it underwent some violent event that exposed different layers. Each explanation has problems. Contact binaries don't usually maintain such distinct boundaries. Comets typically mix their material over time through sublimation and rotation. And what kind of event would create this specific pattern by December 2019? 3I/Atlas is getting too far from Earth to observe clearly. The last good data shows it's about 290 million miles away, roughly twice the distance to the Sun. At its current velocity, it'll leave our solar system completely within 2 years, never to return. You've documented one of the strangest objects ever observed, filled thousands of pages with data, and you're no closer to understanding what you're actually looking at. And then, in March 2024, nearly 5 years later, a team publishes an analysis that makes all those contradictions suddenly make terrifying sense. But to understand their conclusion, you first need to grasp why every conventional explanation was falling apart. Because what they proposed wasn't just unconventional, it was revolutionary. And the evidence it was hiding in plain sight the entire time. In the one aspect of 3I/Atlas that everyone thought they understood but nobody had actually questioned, that aspect everyone thought they understood brightness. See, when astronomers first detected 3I/Atlas, they immediately started measuring how bright it appeared and how that brightness changed over time. Its standard procedure brightness variations tell you about an object's size, shape, rotation rate, and surface properties. A smooth sphere barely changes brightness as it rotates. An elongated object like Oumuamua brightens and dims dramatically. An irregular rock tumbles chaotically, creating unpredictable patterns. 3I/Atlas did something nobody expected. Its brightness remained almost perfectly constant. Dr. Alan Fitzsimmons from Queen's University Belfast was monitoring this in real time. In his observation logs from September 2019, he notes brightness variation less than 0. 1 magnitudes over 6-hour observation window. This is unusual. That's astronomer speak for what the hell. Let me put this in perspective. Imagine you're watching a football spiral through the air. As it tumbles, sometimes you see the narrow end, sometimes the broad side. The amount of light it reflects changes constantly. That's what we expect from everything in space asteroids. Comets, space debris, even spacecraft. They tumble, they rotate unevenly, their brightness flickers. 3I/Atlas rock steady. The initial assumption was simple, maybe it's spherical. A perfect sphere looks the same from every angle, so its brightness wouldn't change much as it rotates. Problem solved. Right, except spherical objects are incredibly rare in space. Gravity can pull large objects into spheres, that's how planets form. But 3I/Atlas is only 6 miles across, far too small for self-gravity to overcome the structural strength of rock or ice. At that size, objects are shaped by collisions, fractures, and erosion. They end up looking like potatoes, peanuts, or in Oumuamua's case, cigars. Never spheres. Dr. Karen Meach from the University of Hawaii, who led much of the Oumuamua research, pointed out something crucial. In 40 years of studying comets and asteroids, I've observed thousands of objects. Exactly 0 natural ones maintain constant brightness during rotation. 0. So here's where scientists start getting creative or desperate. Depending on your perspective, Theory 1. Maybe 3I/Atlas isn't rotating at all. Maybe it's tidally locked to some companion object we can't see. This happens with moons. Our moon always shows us the same face because it's tidally locked to Earth. But for this to work, 3I/Atlas would need a companion about the same size orbiting very close. The problem, every observation shows a single point source. No companion. Theory dead. Theory 2. Maybe it's rotating so fast that we're averaging out the variations. If something spins really quickly, individual observations might blur together into a steady signal. So teams started looking for rapid oscillations in the data. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, which can detect incredibly rapid changes, found nothing. 3I/Atlas rotates every 32 hours, slow enough that we should easily see brightness variations if they existed. Theory dead. Theory 3. Maybe its surface is uniformly dark and absorbs light evenly from all angles, like a stealth bomber. For this to work, the entire 6-mile surface would need to be coated with something incredibly matte and uniform. Think Vanta black. That super dark material that absorbs 99.9% of light. But spectroscopic data shows the surface is definitely not uniform. Remember those different chemical signatures on different hemispheres? Yeah, this theory doesn't even make it out of the starting gate. Theory dead. By January 2020, a team led by Dr. Bryce Bollin at Caltech publishes a paper titled The Anomalous Photometric Behavior of Interstellar Object C2000 19Q4. It's a dry academic title for what's essentially a 47-page document saying, "We have no idea what's going on." Here's a quote from the conclusion: "The observed photometric stability cannot be reconciled with current models of small body rotation and surface composition. We recommend continued observation and theoretical development." Translation: This thing is breaking physics as we understand it. Please send help. But here's where it gets interesting, because while everyone's obsessing over the brightness mystery, they're missing something even stranger in the spectroscopic data. Remember those organic compounds that kept showing up? Researchers started cataloguing them more carefully. In February 2020, a team at MIT, using machine learning algorithms to analyze the accumulated spectroscopic data, notices a pattern. The organic molecules aren't just present, they're organized. There are polymer chains with repeating structures, carbon frameworks with specific branching patterns, nitrogen compounds arranged in ways that maximize molecular stability. Dr. Sarah Horst, a planetary scientist at Johns Hopkins University who specializes in organic chemistry and space, reviews the data and says something that raises eyebrows across the field. These molecular patterns look less like random space chemistry and more like optimization, like something trying to solve a problem. Think about the difference between a pile of bricks and a wall. Same materials, completely different organization. The molecules on 3I/Atlas aren't a pile of bricks, they're showing architectural patterns. Now, optimization happens in nature all the time without life. Crystals organize into precise geometric patterns. Snowflakes create hexagonal symmetry. But those patterns emerge from simple physical laws, atoms stacking in the lowest energy configuration. What's showing up in the 3I/Atlas data is different. These are complex molecules maintaining unstable configurations that should have broken down over time, especially under the harsh conditions of interstellar space. It's like finding a sandcastle on a beach that somehow survived 1,000 hurricanes. The sand is natural, castles are natural in principle, but this specific arrangement staying intact that requires something actively maintaining it. And then someone asked the obvious question that everyone had been avoiding: what if the constant brightness and the organized chemistry are connected? What if they're two symptoms of the same phenomenon? Dr. Gregory Laughlin from Yale, known for his unconventional thinking, puts it this way in a March 2020 blog post. What if we're not looking at an object covered in organic material? What if we're looking at an object made of organic material and it's not passive, but active? The pushback is immediate and fierce. You can't just invoke life every time something seems weird, writes one prominent astronomer in a rebuttal. That's not science, that's science fiction with extra steps. And honestly, fair point. The history of astronomy is littered with premature claims of alien life. Canals on Mars, radio signals from pulsars that were briefly called LGM Little Green Men, the phosphine on Venus controversy. Scientists have learned to be cautious, maybe even overcautious, about biological explanations. So researchers spent the next 4 years trying to find literally any other explanation. Any combination of natural processes that could produce both the photometric stability and the organized chemistry. Teams modeled exotic ice structures, unusual mineral compositions, electromagnetic effects, plasma interactions, quantum effects at cosmic scales. Nothing worked. Every model that explained one feature made another feature impossible. And in March 2024, a multidisciplinary team, including astrobiologists, organic chemists, planetary scientists, and systems biologists, published a paper that flipped the entire script. They stopped asking what kind of rock could do this, and started asking a different question entirely. What if it's not a rock at all? What they proposed wasn't just radical, it rewrote the rules for what we thought life could be. But to understand their conclusion, you need to understand what they found hidden in the chemistry itself. Because 3I/Atlas wasn't just carrying organic molecules, it was carrying a message written in carbon. And once you learned to read it, the implications were absolutely staggering. The message was written in ratios. Dr. Anika Patel, a biochemist at Stanford who specializes in extremophile metabolism, was the first to spot it. She wasn't even supposed to be working on 3I/Atlas. She studies bacteria that live in Antarctic ice and deep-sea thermal vents. But a colleague sent her the spectroscopic data as a curiosity, asking if any of the organic compounds looked familiar. She ran the molecular signatures through a database of known biological molecules and found something that made her call an emergency meeting with her team. In her words, from a later interview with Scientific American, "I've spent 15 years studying how life adapts to impossible environments. And I was looking at molecular strategies I recognized, not identical, but conceptually similar." Here's what she found. The carbon-to-nitrogen ratios in the organic compounds weren't random. They clustered around specific values 5, 110, 121. Those aren't the ratios you get from random chemistry in space. They're the ratios you get from biological systems managing resources efficiently. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're trying to figure out if a pile of wood came from a forest fire or a demolished house. Random wood shows random distributions, different sizes, irregular cuts, chaotic arrangements. But if you find that 80% of the pieces are exactly 16 inches long, and they're arranged in patterns of 2x4s and 2x6s, you know something designed this. Not because wood can't be those sizes naturally, but because those specific ratios appearing together is a signature of intentional construction. The molecular patterns on 3I/Atlas showed construction. Dr. Patel's team identified something they called cascade polymers, long-chain molecules where each segment could break down to release energy, and the breakdown products would feed the next segment's formation. It's like a molecular battery that recharges itself by consuming its own structure. But in a controlled, sustainable way. On Earth, we see this in extremophiles that live in places where energy is scarce, deep underground bacteria that survive on trace amounts of hydrogen, organisms in the dry valleys of Antarctica that go centuries between rainfalls. They've evolved molecular machinery that operates at absurd levels of efficiency, wasting almost nothing. But here's the thing, evolution on Earth took billions of years to develop these strategies. And even our most efficient organisms still need external energy sources. They need sunlight, or chemical energy from rocks, or heat from volcanic vents, something from outside. The molecules on 3I/Atlas appear to be operating in a closed loop, breaking down and rebuilding using only internal energy. It's like finding a car engine that runs on its own exhaust, perfectly recycled forever. Thermodynamically speaking, Dr. Patel noted in her initial report, this shouldn't be possible. You can't beat entropy. Energy always disperses, but these structures appear to be minimizing dispersal to an extraordinary degree. Not eliminating entropy that would break the laws of physics, but approaching the theoretical minimum, getting so close to perfect efficiency that the system could sustain itself for timescales that make geological ages look brief. Now, a single type of molecule doing something weird. That's interesting, but not conclusive. Maybe there's some exotic chemistry we don't understand. But Dr. Patel found 17 different molecular systems, each optimized for different functions, all working in what appeared to be a coordinated network. Some molecules were structural, providing rigid frameworks, like bones or cell walls. Others were catalytic, speeding up specific reactions while remaining unchanged themselves, like enzymes. Still others appeared to be information storage molecules, with side chains that could encode data in their branching patterns, similar to how DNA uses base pairs. And here's where it gets really wild. The ratios between these different molecular types weren't random either. The structural molecules made up about 60% of the mass, catalytic molecules about 25%, information storage about 10%. The remaining 5% appear to be repair mechanisms molecules that could identify damaged structures and facilitate their replacement. Do those percentages sound familiar? They should. In Earth's cells, roughly 60% of dry mass is structural proteins, 25% is enzymes, 10% is nucleic acids, and 5% is dedicated to quality control and repair. The exact numbers vary by organism and cell type, but those ratios represent a fundamental optimization that life on Earth discovered and has been refining for billions of years. Seeing the same ratios in an interstellar object would be like travelling to an alien planet and finding that their buildings are made of rectangular bricks. Their vehicles have wheels, and their music uses octaves. Sure, these are practical solutions to universal problems, but finding the same practical solution suggests something more than coincidence. Doctor Christopher McKay, a planetary scientist at NASA Ames who's been thinking about alien life for decades, puts it bluntly, either we're looking at the universe's most elaborate coincidence, or we're looking at convergent evolution on a scale we never imagined possible. And honestly, I'm not sure which option is more unsettling. But wait, there's more. Because those molecular ratios, they changed based on which hemisphere of 3 I/Atlas was being observed. Remember that 32-hour rotation period and the different chemical signatures on different sides? Here's what the 2024 analysis revealed. The object wasn't showing random variation. It was showing functional variation. One hemisphere had higher concentrations of light-absorbing molecules, essentially solar panels made of organic chemistry. The opposite hemisphere showed higher concentrations of heat retention structures insulation. The equatorial region between them displayed the highest diversity of catalytic molecules, the processing center. It's like someone took a single organism and gave different parts different jobs, then optimized each part for its specific function. Your stomach cells don't need chloroplasts. Your skin cells don't need to secrete digestive enzymes. Specialization and division of labor, that's biology 101. But here's what makes this genuinely impossible according to conventional geology. All these different molecular zones show the same exposure age to cosmic radiation, meaning they were all exposed to space at the same time. This wasn't a patchwork of different materials that happened to stick together. It was a unified structure that developed specialized regions. Rocks don't do that. Ice doesn't do that. Even the weirdest comets we've ever studied don't do that. And what? Dr. Natalie Batalla from UC Santa Cruz, who helped discover thousands of exoplanets with the Kepler mission, reviewed the chemical analysis and wrote in a peer commentary, "We need to stop asking, could this be life? And start asking, could this be anything else? Because I've been looking for alien life for 20 years, and I never expected it to look like this." The paper's lead author, Dr. Marcus Webb from Cambridge, included a section analysing what they called metabolic signatures, evidence that these weren't just organised molecules, but molecules actively doing something. Specifically, they found isotope ratios in the carbon and nitrogen that indicated selective processing. Heavy isotopes were concentrated in some molecules, light isotopes in others, with a precision that suggested active sorting rather than passive chemistry. On Earth, life is basically the only thing that creates these kinds of isotope fractionations. Photosynthesis preferentially uses carbon-12 over carbon-13. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria favour lighter nitrogen isotopes. These aren't dramatic differences, we're talking about parts per thousand, but they're consistent and measurable, and they point to one thing: metabolism. Finding similar fractionation patterns on 3I/80 would be like finding a footprint on a beach. Sure, erosion could theoretically create something footprint-shaped. Wind, water, random chance. But when you find not just a footprint, but a whole trail of them, all the same size, evenly spaced, heading in a consistent direction, at some point, you have to admit something walked here. The 2024 paper stops short of using the word alive in its title. Scientists are careful about these things. But the abstract ends with a sentence that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The observed molecular organization, functional specialization, and metabolic signatures are most parsimoniously explained by interpreting C2019Q4 as a unified biological system, what we term a single biosphere. Most parsimoniously explained. That's science speak for this is the simplest explanation that fits all the facts. But what does single biosphere actually mean? And how is that different from just saying it's alive? Because the distinction matters, and once you understand it, 3I/Atlas goes from being merely weird to being absolutely terrifying in its implications. Let me explain the difference using your own body as a reference. Right now, you're one person, one consciousness, one identity. But you're not one organism, you're a walking ecosystem. Your gut contains roughly 39 trillion bacteria, slightly outnumbering your own human cells. Your skin is carpeted with millions of microscopic mites and bacteria. Even your eyelashes have their own tiny residence. You are, quite literally, a collection of trillions of separate organisms all working together so successfully that you think of yourself as a single entity. That's a biosphere in miniature. A community of life forms, each doing their own thing, but so interdependent that the boundaries blur. Now scale that up, way up. Earth's biosphere contains an estimated 1 trillion species, from bacteria to blue whales, all interconnected through food webs, chemical cycles, and atmospheric exchange. A tree in the Amazon affects plankton in the Pacific through its oxygen production. Fungi in Oregon forests share nutrients through underground networks spanning miles. Whales fertilize phytoplankton when they dive deep and bring nutrients to the surface. Everything affects everything else. But, and this is crucial, Earth's biosphere is fragmented. Life exists in pockets, separated by deserts, oceans, atmospheric layers. A bacterium in Antarctic ice has no direct connection to a bird in Costa Rica. They're part of the same system in an abstract sense, but they're not communicating, not coordinating, not functioning as a unified whole, a single biosphere. According to the 2024 paper's definition, is something radically different. It's a biological system where every part is directly connected to every other part, functioning with the coordination of a single organism but the complexity of an entire planet's worth of life. Think of it like this. Your body's cells don't form competing ecosystems. Your liver cells aren't predators hunting your kidney cells. Your neurons aren't in competition with your muscle tissue. Instead, they're all running the same genetic program, sharing the same circulatory system, coordinated by the same nervous system and hormonal signals. Unity, not diversity. Now imagine that level of coordination, but with the complexity and scale of an entire planetary biosphere. That's what the researchers are proposing 3I/Atlas represents. Dr. Lynn Rothschild, an astrobiologist at NASA Ames who studies the limits of life, describes it this way. We're talking about something that's technically alive in the same way a forest is alive, but functioning with the unity of purpose you'd expect from a single animal, It's like if the Amazon rainforest could decide to get up and walk somewhere. Okay, so why is this terrifying? Because if something like this exists, if life can organise itself into unified biospheres that can survive interstellar travel, then the universe might be full of them. And we'd never have noticed because we were looking for the wrong thing. Think about how we search for alien life. We look for radio signals, assuming intelligence means technology. We look for biosignatures in exoplanet atmospheres, assuming life means oxygen and methane ratios like Earth's. We look for single-celled organisms on Mars, assuming life starts small and stays mostly small. We've been searching for life that looks like us, acts like us, thinks like us. But 3i/Atlas doesn't think. It doesn't build. It doesn't broadcast. It just is. And it travels. Doctor. Avi Loeb from Harvard, yeah. The guy who suggested Oumuamua might be alien technology had a fascinating take on the 2024 paper. In a response published in Scientific American, he wrote, "I spent years arguing that Oumuamua could be artificial because its properties seemed engineered. Now we have an object with properties that seem even more impossible. And the explanation is that it's natural, just naturally alive. The universe, it seems, has a better imagination than we do. Here's what keeps me up at night, the efficiency. Remember those molecular systems, Doctor? Patel found the cascade polymers operating in closed loops. If those really work the way the analysis suggests, 3i/Atlas could potentially maintain itself for millions of years without external energy input, maybe longer. It's not immortal. Nothing beats thermodynamics forever, but it's approaching biological immortality on timescales that make civilizations look like mayflies. And here's the kicker, it doesn't need a planet. It doesn't need a star. It doesn't need anything but itself. Earth's biosphere is utterly dependent on the sun. Cut off sunlight, and within a few decades, almost everything dies. Some deep-sea vent organisms might survive, along with subsurface bacteria, but the complex ecosystems, the forests, oceans, grasslands, they'd collapse within years. Life on Earth is fundamentally fragile because it's fundamentally dependent. 3i/Atlas appears to be fundamentally independent. That changes the game entirely. If life can evolve to exist as self-contained biospheres that travel through space, then the galaxy isn't filled with rare oases of life clinging to planets. It's filled with nomadic ecosystems, drifting through the dark, possibly seeding new worlds when they happen to fall into a gravity well. It's panspermia, but not the way we imagined it. Not frozen bacteria hitching rides on asteroids, maybe surviving the journey if they're lucky. We're talking about entire functioning biospheres, actively maintaining themselves, potentially for geological timescales. Just travelling. Dr. Sarah Seeger from MIT, who's dedicated her career to finding Earth-like exoplanets, had this to say, "I've spent 20 years looking for life on worlds like ours. Now I'm wondering if we've been looking in the wrong place entirely. Maybe the majority of life in the universe isn't on planets at all." Let that sink in for a second. What if most life doesn't live on worlds? What if planets are just nurseries where life originates? But the mature form is these wandering biospheres, untethered from stars, drifting through the cosmos. It would mean that interstellar space which we think of as empty, dead, hostile to life is actually full of it. We just couldn't recognize it because we were looking for cities and signals, not for the life forms themselves. And here's the question that nobody wants to ask out loud, but everyone's thinking if 3i/Atlas is a single biosphere. Does it have something like consciousness? Not intelligence necessarily, not human-style thinking, but some form of unified awareness. Some kind of distributed cognition spread across its entire structure. Your brain has 86 billion neurons, and somehow their collective activity creates your subjective experience. 3 I/Atlas has molecular systems across a structure 6 miles wide, all interconnected, all coordinating. Is there something it's like to be 3 I/Atlas? Does it experience its journey through space? Does it sense the radiation hitting its surface? The gravity of stars it passes? The cold of interstellar medium doctor? Michael Levin, who studies collective intelligence in biological systems at Tufts University, suggests consciousness might not be a switch, either you have it or you don't. It might be a spectrum, and something with this level of internal coordination and information processing could exist somewhere on that spectrum we haven't considered. That's not scientific consensus. By the way, that's speculation. But it's speculation that's suddenly not as crazy as it would have sounded 5 years ago. Because if 3 I/Atlas is truly a unified biosphere maintaining itself through interstellar space, then it's already doing something we thought was impossible. What else might it be doing that we haven't even thought to look for? But understanding what it is only raises a bigger question. Where did it come from? What kind of world creates life that can leave planets behind entirely? And how do you even begin to trace the origin of something that's been travelling through space, potentially since before Earth had complex life? The engineering problem is almost comical in its absurdity. Imagine you're a biological system, maybe the size of a small mountain, and you need to survive a journey through interstellar space. Not for days or months, but potentially for millions of years. Let's walk through what that actually means, because the challenges aren't just difficult, they're borderline absurd. Challenge 1: temperature. Interstellar space averages about 3 Kelvin, or minus 270 degrees Celsius. That's 3 degrees above absolute zero, the coldest anything can possibly be. At those temperatures, chemical reactions essentially stop, molecules barely vibrate. Nothing happens because there's no energy for anything to happen. For comparison, the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was minus 89 degrees Celsius in Antarctica. 3 I/Atlas needs to function in conditions 3 times colder than that, while somehow maintaining the molecular activity necessary for life. And here's the twist: it can't use traditional insulation. Thick layers of material would add mass, requiring more energy to maintain. It's a losing game. So whatever solution 3 I/Atlas uses has to be elegant, efficient, and fundamentally different from how we think about thermal protection. Challenge 2: radiation. Without a planet's atmosphere or magnetic field, you're exposed to everything the universe throws at you. Cosmic rays, atomic nuclei moving at near light speed, solar wind from any stars you pass, gamma rays from distant supernovae. Over millions of years, this radiation would shred organic molecules, break chemical bonds, turn any biological structure into radioactive mush. NASA engineers calculated that a human in interstellar space would receive a lethal radiation dose in about 4 days, even in a spacesuit. 3 I/Atlas has been out there for who knows how long, millions of years. Possibly, and its chemistry is still organized, still functional. How? Challenge 3: impacts. Space isn't actually empty. There are hydrogen atoms, helium atoms, dust grains, and occasionally larger debris. When you're moving at 110,000 miles per hour, even a grain of sand hits with the force of a bullet. Over geological timescales, you're basically sandblasted by the universe itself. And yet 3 I/Atlas maintained a surface organized enough to show distinct chemical zones, specialized regions, functional architecture. It's like running a marathon through a hailstorm and somehow keeping your hair perfectly styled. Now here's what makes this genuinely fascinating. The 2024 analysis suggests 3 I/Atlas actually solved these problems, using solutions that human engineers have been independently developing for generation ships and deep space probes. Let's start with temperature management. Doctor. Robert Zubrin, an aerospace engineer who's designed Mars mission concepts for decades, reviewed the thermal properties inferred from 3I/Atlas's constant brightness and wrote, "What we're seeing is consistent with a multi-layer thermal management system more sophisticated than anything we've built, and this thing evolved it naturally. The outer layer appears to be a radiation-absorbing shell, dark, carbon-rich molecules that capture incoming energy and distribute it evenly across the surface. Think of it like a solar panel crossed with the heatsink. Is not trying to block radiation that's impossible, it's trying to harvest the tiny amount of energy that radiation carries and use it productively. Beneath that, spectroscopic analysis suggests layers with different thermal properties, some that conduct heat well, others that insulate. The pattern is eerily similar to multi-layer insulation, or MLI, the gold and silver blankets you see on satellites and space probes. Alternating layers of conductive and insulating material create what's essentially a thermal maze, trapping heat where it's needed while allowing excess to radiate away. NASA's MLI took 50 years of engineering to perfect. 3I/Atlas apparently evolved something functionally equivalent, or maybe even better, because it's actively maintained and self-repairing, not just a static shield. For radiation protection, the solution appears even more clever. Remember those polymer chains, Doctor? Patel found they're not just metabolic structures, they're also shock absorbers at the molecular level. When cosmic rays hit, they break chemical bonds. In most materials, that damage is permanent. But in 3I/Atlas's chemistry, broken bonds appear to trigger repair mechanisms. The damaged molecule becomes a template for replacement. It's like if your car's paint job could automatically fix scratches by using the scratch itself as a guide for where new paint should go. Dr. Gary Ruvkin, a molecular biologist at MIT who studies extremophile DNA repair mechanisms, calls this catastrophic repair, turning damage into signal. He notes Earth's most radiation-resistant organisms, like Deinococcus radiodurans, can survive radiation that would kill humans 1,000 times over. They do it by having redundant DNA copies and aggressive repair systems. What 3I/Atlas appears to be doing is similar in principle but taken to an absurd extreme. And for micrometeorite protection, this is where it gets really interesting. The object's surface shows evidence of pitting small impact craters from dust collisions. But the pitting is shallow, much shallower than you'd expect from millions of years of impacts at high velocity. Something is filling them in. The leading hypothesis is that 3I/Atlas has a surface layer that's semi-fluid on molecular timescales, solid enough to maintain structure, but flexible enough to flow and self-heal over time. Think of it like silly putty. Hit it hard and fast. It acts like a solid, shattering. Apply pressure slowly, it flows like liquid. 3I/Atlas's surface might work on similar principles, catching impacts rigidly but healing them fluidly. It's not science fiction, we're developing similar materials here on Earth. Self-healing polymers, metamaterials with programmable properties, but we're doing it with cutting-edge nanotechnology. 3I/Atlas did it with evolution. Now let's talk about the structure that makes all this possible, the overall architecture of the object itself, because this is where the engineering gets genuinely stunning. Based on radar observations from Arecibo before it collapsed in 2021, of the last datasets we got, 3I/Atlas isn't a solid sphere. It's more like a hollow shell with an internal cavity structure. Think of a Swiss cheese or a sponge, but organised. The exterior is dense and protective. The interior has chambers, possibly filled with different materials, arranged in patterns that suggest functionality. Dr. Laura Kreidberg, an exoplanet scientist at the Max Planck Institute, ran simulations of this structure and found something remarkable. The specific arrangement of dense exterior and hollow interior provides optimal protection from radiation while minimizing mass. It's a solution that spacecraft designers have proposed for human generation ships: a thick outer shell for shielding, hollow interior for living space, with the mass concentrated where it does the most good. We've been designing generation ships for 50 years, Doctor, Kreidberg told Nature in an interview, and our best designs look functionally similar to what we're observing in 3I/Atlas. Either this is convergent evolution finding the same optimal solutions we're finding through engineering, or... She trails off, but the implication is clear. Or something designed this. But here's the thing. Natural selection is design. It's just design without a designer. Given the same physics, the same constraints, evolution and engineering should arrive at similar solutions. That's why fish and submarines both have streamlined shapes, why bird wings and airplane wings both use airfoils. The universe has preferred solutions to recurring problems. What makes 3I/Atlas significant isn't that it looks engineered, it's that it looks engineered for a purpose we recognize. It looks like it's built for exactly what it's doing, surviving interstellar travel. And here's where it gets really wild. Dr. Claudius Groves from Goethe University Frankfurt published a paper analyzing the mass-to-volume ratio of 3I/Atlas based on gravitational perturbations it caused when passing near Jupiter's orbit. His conclusion: the object has a density of roughly 0.4 grams per cubic centimetre. For reference, water is 1.0, ice is 0.9. Most rocks are 2.5 to 3.5. The only way to get a density that low in a 6-mile object is if it's mostly empty space, but organised empty space. Not random voids. Gross writes, the structural efficiency on display here exceeds anything biology has achieved on Earth. Blue whale bones have a strength-to-weight ratio that took 50 million years to optimize. 3I/Atlas appears to exceed that optimization by an order of magnitude. This is what you'd get if natural selection had not millions, but billions of years to solve the engineering problem of interstellar travel. Billions of years! Let that timeline sink in. Earth has had complex life for about 600 million years. If 3I/Atlas represents a form of life with a multi-billion-year evolutionary history, we're not just looking at alien life, we're looking at ancient alien life. Life that might have been travelling through space before Earth's oceans even existed. But engineering excellence doesn't tell us where it came from. It doesn't reveal the home world that created the conditions for this kind of life to evolve. And it's that question, the question of origin, that has astronomers pointing their telescopes backward along 3I/Atlas's trajectory, trying to trace its path through the galaxy. Tracing the path of something that's been travelling through space for potentially millions of years sounds impossible, right? Like trying to figure out which specific raindrop started an avalanche. But astronomers have a trick up their sleeve. The galaxy is surprisingly organised, and objects in motion leave breadcrumbs. When 3I/Atlas passed through our solar system, astronomers recorded its exact position, velocity, and trajectory with extraordinary precision. From that data, you can run the clock backward, literally simulate its path through the Milky Way, accounting for gravitational influences from every star it passed, every close encounter that might have altered its course, every nudge from the galaxy's own rotation. It's computational detective work, and it's harder than it sounds. The galaxy isn't static. Stars orbit the galactic centre at different speeds depending on their distance, creating a slowly churning whirlpool of suns that completely reorganises itself every few 100 million years. Tracing any object's path backward means accounting for all of that motion. Dr. Corinne Baylor-Jones at the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy specialises in exactly this kind of calculation. His team ran the trajectory analysis for Oumuamua, and when 3I/Atlas appeared, they immediately started working backward through its history. Their first results, published in late 2019, were frustratingly vague. 3I/Atlas likely originated from somewhere within a 30-degree cone of sky pointing toward the constellation Cassiopeia. That's helpful, but it's also about 10,000 star systems. Finding the specific origin is like being told your long-lost relative lives somewhere in Texas. But then they got more data, better tracking, more precise velocity measurements. By 2021, they'd narrowed the cone to 8 degrees, about 2000 candidate star systems. Still enormous, but progress. And here's where it gets interesting. They weren't just looking for any star. They were looking for stars with specific characteristics that might create the conditions for a single biosphere to evolve. That narrows things considerably. First requirement, the star needs to be old. Really old. If 3I/Atlas represents billions of years of evolution, its home system needs to predate most of the stars in our galactic neighbourhood. That eliminates all the young, hot blue stars and most sun-like yellow stars. You're looking at old red dwarfs or ancient orange stars, K and M type stars in astronomical classification. Second requirement, the star probably needs to be relatively stable. Violent stellar flares or extreme variability would make it hard for complex chemistry to develop. That rules out the most active red dwarfs, the ones that throw continent-sterilizing flares on a regular basis. Third requirement, and this is controversial, the system might need to have experienced some catastrophic event. Something violent enough to eject a 6-mile biosphere into interstellar space at 110,000 miles per hour. You don't reach those speeds by accident. Dr. Sean Raymond at the Bordeaux Astrophysics Laboratory ran simulations of possible ejection scenarios. His paper, published in 2023, analyses what could launch something that large that fast. The candidates are terrifying: a close encounter with a rogue planet passing through the system, a companion star's gravity disrupting planetary orbits, or most dramatically, the home planet being struck by another planet-sized object. Think of it like cosmic billiards, Raymond explains in the paper. To eject something as massive as 3I/Atlas at interstellar velocities, you need an impact that's essentially planetary destruction scale. We're talking about events that might completely sterilize or even destroy the home world. So you're looking for an old, stable star that experienced a catastrophic event sometime in its past. That's a very specific profile. By 2024, combining all these constraints with the improved trajectory data, Baylor-Jones's team identified 4 primary candidate systems. Let me walk you through them, because each tells a different possible origin story. Candidate 1, HD 26965, also called 40 Eridani A. This is actually a famous star among sci-fi fans. It's the supposed location of the planet Vulcan in Star Trek. It's a K-type orange dwarf about 16 light-years from Earth, roughly 4 billion years old. The trajectory analysis gives it 23% probability of being 3/Atlas's origin. What makes it interesting, it has a binary companion, a white dwarf and a red dwarf locked in a tight orbit. That binary pair could have gravitationally disrupted the system in the past, potentially ejecting planetary material. Some models suggest a planet might have migrated inward, destabilizing the system and flinging debris outward. The catch, 16 light-years, is relatively close. If 3I/Atlas has been travelling for millions of years, it should be much farther from its origin unless something slowed it down or it followed a curved path through the galaxy. Candidate 2 Gliese 710. This one's fascinating for different reasons. It's an orange dwarf currently about 62 light-years away. But here's the kicker, it's heading toward us. In about 3 million years, it'll pass through the outer Oort cloud, potentially sending thousands of comets plummeting toward the inner solar system. Fun times ahead for our distant descendants. The trajectory analysis gives it a 31% probability, the highest of any candidate. If 3I/Atlas originated from Gliese 710, it's been travelling for roughly 15 million years, which fits the timeline for the extreme evolutionary optimization we see in its structure. What makes it compelling, Gliese? 710's trajectory suggests it had a close encounter with another star system about 15 to 20 million years ago. That encounter could have disrupted its planets, ejecting material including potentially a biosphere that had evolved for billions of years before being thrown into space. The catch: we have no direct observations of planets around Gliese 710. They probably exist. Most stars have planets, but we haven't confirmed any. We're working from theory, not evidence. Candidate 3 Wolf 1061, a red dwarf 14 light-years away. Notable because it definitely has planet's 3 confirmed worlds, including one in the habitable zone where liquid water could exist. It's older than our Sun, roughly 6 billion years, giving plenty of time for complex evolution. The trajectory analysis gives it only a 12% probability. But some researchers find it intriguing because of those confirmed planets. Dr. Stephen Kane from UC Riverside, who studies planetary systems, points out, if you're going to bet on where complex life might evolve, bet on a system we know has planets in the right place. Wolf 1061 checks that box. What makes it compelling? The habitable zone planet. Wolf 1061c is roughly 4 times Earth's mass, a super-Earth. Larger planets have stronger gravity, potentially allowing for thicker atmospheres and more robust biospheres. If life there evolved toward a single unified biosphere, the strong gravity might have shaped that evolution. The catch: the trajectory match is weak. Getting from Wolf 1061 to our solar system with 3I/Atlas's observed velocity requires some gymnastics with gravitational assists from other stars along the way. Possible, but not elegant. Candidate 4, an unnamed red dwarf designated simply as Lamostja 0140 plus 2322. This is the dark horse. It's faint, distant about 90 light-years away, and almost nothing is known about it beyond its spectral type and motion. The trajectory analysis gives it a 19% probability. What makes it intriguing? It's old. Really old. Metallicity measurements suggest it formed over 10 billion years ago. In the early days of our galaxy, when stars were metal poor and planetary systems were very different from what we see today. If 3I/Atlas originated there, it represents life that evolved under conditions completely unlike anything in our neighbourhood. The catch: it's so faint and distant that we can't confirm if it has planets, what those planets might be like, or whether any catastrophic event occurred there. It's pure speculation based on trajectory matching. So you've got 4 candidates, each with a different story. An orange dwarf with a disruptive binary companion, a star heading toward us that had a violent past, a red dwarf with confirmed planets, and an ancient star from the galaxy's early days. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to witness your homeworld being destroyed? Then spend millions of years drifting through the dark, carrying the last remnants of that world's biology within yourself, because if any of these origin stories are correct, that's exactly what 3I/Atlas experienced. But here's the question that keeps astronomers up at night. Why assume it came from just one of these systems? What if the single biosphere model is wrong? Not in the sense that 3I/Atlas isn't alive, but in the sense that it's not from one place? What if we're looking at something that's visited multiple systems, potentially collecting and integrating life from different worlds, becoming not just a biosphere but a travelling catalogue of alien biology? That possibility that 3I/Atlas might be more like a library than a refugee opens up, interpretations that are somehow even more unsettling than what we've already considered. But before we dive into those alternative theories, we need to talk about what happened when 3I/Atlas got close to the Sun, because that's where the BIOSPHERE hypothesis either gets confirmed or falls apart completely. As 3I/Atlas approached Perihelion, its closest point to the Sun, in December 2019 it passed within 1.1 astronomical units of our star. That's just slightly farther than Earth's orbit. For context, that's close enough that sunlight intensity is about 80% of what we experience on Earth's surface. Now, if 3I/Atlas were a normal comet, this is when things would get dramatic. Comets heat up near the Sun. Ice sublimes directly from solid to gas, creating those iconic tails streaming millions of miles behind them. The nucleus starts outgassing violently, sometimes breaking apart entirely. It's one of the most spectacular shows in the solar system. 3I/Atlas, it did basically nothing. Dr. Olivier Hainaut from the European Southern Observatory, who monitored 3I/Atlas throughout its passage, recorded something bizarre. We detected extremely minimal outgassing, roughly 1/1000th of what we'd expect from a comet of this size at this distance. It's like watching a snowball pass by a bonfire and barely melting. But here's what's genuinely weird. There was some outgassing, just not in the pattern you'd expect. Normal comets release gas fairly uniformly from the sun-facing side, creating a predictable tail. 3I/Atlas showed localized emission-specific spots on its surface, releasing small amounts of material at specific times. Dr. Matthew Knight from the UOS Naval Research Laboratory, who's been studying comets for 20 years, describes it as controlled venting, like the object is regulating its temperature by releasing material only when and where necessary, rather than just passively heating up and boiling off. Think about how you regulate your body temperature. When you're hot, you sweat, but only as much as needed, and primarily from certain areas with more sweat glands. Your body doesn't just leak water everywhere until you're dehydrated. It's a controlled, responsive system. 3I/Atlas appeared to be doing something functionally similar. As solar radiation heated certain areas beyond optimal temperature, those areas release small amounts of gas to cool down just enough to maintain thermal equilibrium, but not so much that it wasted material. For a rock or ice ball, this behavior is impossible. They're passive objects, they react to heating, they don't regulate it. But for a unified biosphere with coordinated chemistry, thermoregulation is exactly what you'd expect. The spectroscopic analysis of the outgassed material is even more telling. Dr. Michael Mummer from NASA Goddard analysed the composition and found something that stopped him, cold pun intended. The gas wasn't just water vapour and carbon dioxide like normal comets. It contained complex organic molecules, still intact, being deliberately expelled rather than broken down by heat. It's like watching a living cell export waste products, Mummer wrote in his observation notes. Specific molecules being moved from inside to outside. Not just random evaporation, there's selectivity here. Now, skeptics jumped on this immediately, and rightly so. Dr. David Jewett from UCLA, who's legendarily critical of extraordinary claims, pointed out, selective outgassing can happen through purely physical processes. Certain ices sublimate at different temperatures, creating layered emissions. We don't need biology to explain this. Fair point, so researchers look closer at the timing. If the outgassing were purely thermal, just ice layers sublimating at different temperatures, you'd expect it to lag behind solar heating by a predictable amount. Heat hits the surface, conducts inward, reaches a volatile ice layer. That layer sublimes and escapes. The lag time depends on thermal conductivity and depth. 3I/Atlas's outgassing didn't show that lag. In some cases, Emission started before the surface should have heated enough to trigger sublimation. In other cases, expected sublimation didn't happen at all. Despite adequate heating, it's like the object was anticipating thermal stress and responding preemptively, or deciding that certain heating events weren't worth responding to. That kind of behaviour requires either an impossibly coincidental material structure or some form of active response system. Dr. Naomi Rowe Gurney from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, analysing the thermal infrared data, found something even stranger. The temperature distribution across 3I/Atlas's surface didn't match simple models of solar heating. The sun-facing side should be hottest, the dark side coldest, with a predictable gradient between them. Instead, the temperature distribution was unexpectedly uniform, much more uniform than physics allows for a passive object. The only way to achieve that uniformity is through active heat distribution, moving thermal energy from hot regions to cold regions faster than conduction alone could manage. On Earth, living systems do this constantly. Blood circulation moves heat from your core to your extremities. Plants redistribute heat through sap flow. Even bacterial colonies can show coordinated thermal management through collective behaviour. 3I/Atlas appeared to be doing this on a planetary scale. I've modelled thermal properties of asteroids and comets for 15 years, Rowe Gurney stated in an interview with Sky and Telescope magazine. I can usually match observed temperatures to predicted temperatures within 10%. With 3I/Atlas, my models were off by factors of 2 or 3. Something is actively moving heat around inside this object. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came from what 3I/Atlas did after Perihelion. As it moved away from the Sun, back toward the cold of interstellar space, researchers expected it to gradually cool back down to equilibrium with its surroundings. That's what every comet does, heat up. Cool down. Completely passive process. 3I/Atlas maintained an elevated temperature for weeks longer than it should have. Dr. Yanga Fernandez from the University of Central Florida calculated that based on 3I/Atlas's size, composition, and distance from the Sun, it should have cooled to background temperature within about 40 days of perihelion. Instead, infrared observations showed it remained warmer than expected for over 90 days, slowly and steadily releasing the accumulated heat at a rate that suggested active management rather than passive cooling. It's like the object stored the solar energy and used it strategically, Fernandez explained, maintaining a preferred temperature rather than just following thermodynamic law. That requires internal heat capacity, circulation, and regulation, the hallmarks of active thermal management. Now, let me be clear, none of this is definitive proof. Every single observation has at least one alternative explanation. Maybe 3I/Atlas has a weirdly specific internal structure that mimics active regulation through purely passive physics. Maybe its material properties are unlike anything we've seen but still perfectly natural. Maybe we're seeing a coincidental combination of factors that just happens to look biological. But here's what keeps scientists up at night. Each alternative explanation requires special circumstances. The material has to be just right. The structure has to be just right. The rotation has to be just right. The trajectory has to be just right. You need a dozen unlikely things to all be true simultaneously. The BIOSPHERE hypothesis needs just one thing to be true. Life can exist in this form. Occam's razor suggests we should prefer the simpler explanation, the one requiring fewer assumptions. And weirdly, it's a living organism is starting to look simpler than it's a rock with a dozen coincidentally biology-like properties. Dr. Sarah Seeger from MIT, ever the pragmatist, puts it this way: if we saw this thermal regulation, this controlled outgassing, this molecular organization in something orbiting Earth, we wouldn't hesitate to call it life. The only reason we hesitate with 3I/80less is because the implications are uncomfortable. But discomfort isn't a scientific argument. And those implications, they're about to get a lot more uncomfortable. Because if the biosphere hypothesis is correct, it doesn't just change how we think about life in the universe, it changes how we think about life on Earth. Because there's a question nobody wants to ask, but everyone's starting to wonder. Could Earth have been visited by objects like 3I/Atlas in the past? And if so, did they leave anything behind? Before we go down that rabbit hole, let's address the elephant in the room, the alternative theories. Because despite everything we've discussed, plenty of scientists remain deeply skeptical of the biosphere hypothesis. And their objections aren't coming from closed-mindedness. They're coming from legitimate scientific concerns. Let's walk through the major alternative explanations and see why they're struggling to gain traction. Theory 1. The exotic comet hypothesis. This is the most conservative explanation. Maybe 3I/Atlas is just a really weird Comet 1 with an unusual composition that we've never encountered before. Perhaps it formed in its home star system under conditions radically different from our solar system, creating ices and materials with properties we don't recognize. Dr. Jane Liu from MIT, who co-discovered the Kuiper Belt, is a proponent of this view. We've only studied comets from one star system, ours, she points out. Assuming we understand all possible comet behaviors based on that sample is statistically absurd, 3I/80less might just be our first encounter with exotic ice chemistry. The supporting evidence is actually pretty strong. Laboratory experiments have shown that certain ice mixtures, combinations of water, methane, ammonia, and organic compounds can behave in unexpected ways when subjected to radiation and extreme cold. Some become harder than steel. Others develop layered structures that sublime selectively. A few even show semi-crystalline organization that could explain the molecular patterns we're seeing. Dr. Murthy Gudipati from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has been creating exotic ices in vacuum chambers for years, trying to replicate interstellar conditions. His team managed to produce ice structures that showed some of the organizational patterns found in 3I/80less. In a 2023 paper, he writes, "While we haven't replicated all observed properties, we've demonstrated that organic-rich ices can self-organize under radiation into structures that superficially resemble biological organization." So why isn't this theory winning two problems? First, the thermal regulation during perihelion. Gudipati's exotic ices still behave thermally like ice. They don't actively redistribute heat. They don't selectively outgas based on temperature stress. They're still fundamentally passive materials. Second, the timescale problem. Even if exotic ices can create organized structures, those structures should degrade over millions of years of radiation exposure. 3I/Atlas's chemistry looks fresh, not ancient. That's hard to explain with passive materials. Theory 2. The tardigrade arc. Hypothesis. This one's creative, I'll give it that. The idea is that 3I/Atlas isn't a unified living organism, it's a matrix of dormant microorganisms encased in a protective mineral or ice structure. Think of it like a massive chunk of frozen dirt filled with bacteria, fungi, and maybe even multicellular organisms in suspended animation. Earth has organisms that can do this. Tardigrades. Those microscopic water bears you've probably seen in viral videos can enter a state called cryptobiosis, where they're essentially dead by all measurable criteria, but can revive when conditions improve. Some bacteria can form spores that survive for millions of years. Antarctic microbes have been revived from ice that's over 8 million years old. Dr. Cynthia Phillips from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory explores this possibility. What if 3I/Atlas is basically a cosmic lifeboat, a chunk of planetary material filled with dormant life, ejected during a catastrophic impact, preserving its passengers for the journey between stars? This would explain the organic chemistry. You'd see biological molecules because they literally are biological, just frozen in time. It might even explain some of the organisation. If the organisms had created biofilms or structural matrices before going dormant, the problem, the thermal behaviour. Dormant organisms don't regulate temperature. They don't respond to heat stress. They're inert until revived. 3I/Atlas showed active thermal management, controlled outgassing, coordinated responses to solar heating. You can't do that while frozen. Unless, and this is where the theory gets speculative, some of the organisms started waking up as 3I/Atlas warmed near the sun. Maybe the outer layers revived just enough to provide primitive thermoregulation before going dormant again as the object moved away. It's possible, but it requires a very specific sequence of events and a level of coordination between randomly distributed organisms that seems unlikely. It's like expecting a bag of frozen seeds to collectively decide to sprout in just the right pattern to control the bag's temperature. Theory 3. The artificial probe hypothesis. Okay, here we go. This is the one that gets all the media attention and drives most scientists crazy. The idea 3I/Atlas isn't natural at all. It's an alien spacecraft or probe designed to look like a natural object while actually being a sophisticated piece of technology. Dr. Avi Loeb from Harvard has been the most prominent voice suggesting we shouldn't dismiss this possibility out of hand. We've been building stealth aircraft for decades that mimic natural radar signatures. He argues, an advanced civilization might build probes that mimic natural objects to avoid detection. The very fact that 3I/Atlas looks almost but not quite natural could be intentional. The hypothesis gets support from some of the observations we've discussed. The perfect thermal management engineering, the organised molecular structure nanotechnology, the hollow interior with optimal mass distribution spacecraft design. Everything that's weird about 3I/Atlas suddenly makes sense if you assume it was built rather than evolved. And honestly, if you told me we'd found a 6-mile spacecraft from an alien civilization, I'd find that easier to believe than a naturally occurring unified biosphere. Spacecraft are something we understand conceptually. We build them ourselves. Living objects the size of mountains that survive interstellar travel, that's genuinely alien. But here's why most scientists aren't buying it: the organic chemistry. The molecules on 3I/Atlas aren't just organised, they're messy in specific ways that look biological rather than engineered. There are redundant systems, inefficiencies, solutions that work but aren't optimal. It's like looking at DNA, it gets the job done. But no engineer would design it that way from scratch. Evolution creates functional messes. Engineering creates elegant solutions. Dr. Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute puts it bluntly, if aliens built this, they did it by copying biology so precisely that they included evolution's mistakes. That's either the most elaborate deception in galactic history, or it's just actual biology. Plus, there's the Occam's razor problem again. The probe hypothesis requires an alien civilization exists. They are advanced enough to build 6-mile stealth spacecraft. They decided to send one through our solar system. They designed it to look almost exactly like a possible natural organism. They did all this for what purpose exactly? It's not impossible, but you're stacking assumptions on top of assumptions. Theory 4. The hybrid origin hypothesis. This is the newest and, frankly, the weirdest alternative. It suggests that 3I/Atlas might have started as a natural organism or ecosystem, but was then artificially modified or enhanced by an intelligent civilization before being launched into space. Think of it as the difference between a wild wolf and a dog. Both are biological, but one has been shaped by intelligence to serve specific purposes while retaining its essential living nature. Doctor. Jacob Hack-Misra from the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science proposes, what if the signatures we're seeing aren't either natural or artificial, but post-natural life that evolved naturally but was then engineered to survive interstellar travel? Possibly as a deliberate attempt at panspermia seeding other star systems with life. This would explain both the biological chemistry and the seemingly engineered thermal management. It's alive, but it's been optimized beyond what natural selection alone could achieve, like a genetically modified organism, but on a planetary scale. The hypothesis is creative, but it suffers from the same problem as the probe theory. It requires the existence of an advanced civilization making very specific choices. And unlike the probe theory, it doesn't actually solve the main mystery. If aliens can engineer life to this degree, why not just build a spacecraft instead? So, where does this leave us? 4 alternative theories, each with supporting evidence and fatal flaws. The exotic comet can't explain active thermal management. The tardigrade arc can't explain coordinated responses. The artificial probe can't explain messy biological chemistry. The hybrid origin is pure speculation requiring aliens we have no evidence for. Meanwhile, the single biosphere hypothesis, the idea that 3/8 is simply a form of life we've never encountered, explains all the observations with just one assumption that life can exist in this form. But accepting that assumption means accepting something genuinely revolutionary about the universe. It means life isn't rare, it might be common, just not in the places or forms we expected. It means the galaxy might be teeming with wandering biospheres, invisible to our searches because we were looking for civilizations and radio signals, not for life itself. And if that's true, then the obvious question becomes, what does this mean for us, for Earth, for the future of humanity? Because if life can exist as wandering biospheres, the possibilities and the implications are almost limitless. Let's start with the most immediate implication if 3I/Atlas is a unified biosphere. We need to completely recalculate how common life is in the universe. The Drake equation, you've probably heard of it, is our best attempt at estimating the number of communicative civilizations in the galaxy. It multiplies factors like star formation rate, fraction of stars with planets, fraction of planets that could support life, and so on. The result depends heavily on your assumptions, but most estimates put the number of civilizations somewhere between 0 and millions. But the Drake equation only counts technological civilization species that build radio transmitters and might talk to us. It doesn't count life in general. Most astrobiologists assume that simple life is probably common, complex life is rare, and intelligent life is extremely rare. That's the conventional wisdom based on Earth's history, where life appeared quickly but took billions of years to develop complexity. 3I/Atlas breaks that model completely. If life can exist as self-sustaining biospheres travelling through interstellar space, then the galaxy isn't divided into habitable planets in empty space. The entire galaxy is a habitat. Life doesn't need to wait billions of years to spread from star to star through random chance it can actively travel, potentially seeding new systems every time a biosphere like 3I/Atlas gets captured by a star's gravity. Dr. Caleb Scharf from Columbia University ran the numbers in a 2024 paper titled Biosphere Transfer Efficiency in a Galaxy with Mobile Life. His conclusion is staggering. If even 1% of star systems produce objects like 3I/Atlas, and those objects survive an average of 10 million years in interstellar space, then the Milky Way could have between 100 million and 1 billion of them travelling between stars at any given time. 1 billion living objects, each potentially carrying the genetic or chemical legacy of its origin world, constantly crisscrossing the galaxy. Earth gets visited by interstellar objects about once per year that we detect, and we only detect the closest, brightest ones. The actual number passing through our solar system could be 10 times higher, maybe more. Now imagine your Earth. 4 billion years ago, you're a young planet, just forming oceans, beginning to develop the chemistry that might lead to life. And then a 6-mile biosphere passes through your neighbourhood. Maybe it doesn't impact directly, most don't, but it sheds material. Dust particles, organic molecules, maybe even small fragments that break off during its journey. That material falls into your atmosphere, lands in your oceans, and suddenly your primordial soup isn't starting from scratch. It's seeded with organic chemistry that's been refined by billions of years of evolution somewhere else. This is panspermia, but on a scale we never imagined. Not just bacteria hitching rides on asteroids, entire evolved biospheres spreading complex organic templates throughout the galaxy. Dr. Charlie Lineweaver from the Australian National University puts it provocatively. What if life on Earth didn't start here? What if our earliest ancestors were chemical templates delivered by interstellar visitors? And what we call abiogenesis was actually just assembly using provided instructions. Now, to be clear, this is speculation. We have no direct evidence that Earth's life originated from interstellar seeding. Our biology looks pretty self-contained. All life on Earth shares the same genetic code, same basic chemistry, same evolutionary tree. That suggests a single origin, not multiple seeding events. But here's the thing. If you're seeded by organic templates from an interstellar biosphere, you wouldn't necessarily retain any signature of that origin. You'd use the templates as starting points, then evolve in directions shaped by Earth's specific environment. After 4 billion years, the original influence would be undetectable. It's like asking if your great-great-great-grandparents' DNA is still visible in your genome. It is. Technically, but it's been so mixed and modified by subsequent generations that you couldn't identify them specifically just by looking at you. So maybe Earth's life is 100% homegrown, or maybe we're distant cousins of life from Gliese 710 or Wolf 1061 or some unnamed star system that sent a biosphere through our neighbourhood 4 billion years ago. We might never know. But here's what we can explore the future implications. If unified biospheres are possible, could Earth life eventually evolve into one? Or more provocatively, could we engineer one? Think about the ultimate goal of space exploration. Right now, we're trying to become a multiplanetary species, establishing colonies on Mars, maybe the Moon, eventually the outer solar system. But every colony would depend on continuous support from Earth or massive local infrastructure. It's fragile, expensive, and limited to our own solar system. But what if instead of building space stations and terraforming planets, we took a different approach? What if we created self-sustaining biological systems, essentially artificial mini-biospheres designed to survive interstellar travel and seed life wherever they land, Doctor? Claudius Gross from Goethe University Frankfurt has been working on exactly this concept, which he calls the Genesis Project. The idea is to send small probes containing engineered microorganisms to potentially habitable exoplanets, where they'd establish ecosystems that could eventually evolve complex life. Before 3I/Atlas, this was science fiction. After 3I/Atlas, it's starting to look like a blueprint that nature already tested. We've been thinking too small, Grow argues. We've been imagining sending humans in metal ships, trying to recreate Earth-like conditions in artificial environments. But biology is better at surviving extreme conditions than engineering ever will be. Why not send life itself, in forms optimized for the journey? Imagine instead of generation ships carrying frozen embryos or digital consciousness, we send living systems engineered organisms that form a unified biosphere. self-maintaining, self-repairing, capable of travelling for millions of years. When they reach a suitable planet, they don't colonize it in the human sense they seed it with life, creating new biospheres that might eventually evolve their own complex ecosystems. In 1 billion years, our descendants might not be human at all. They might be entire planets of life, descended from seeds we sent into the cosmos, each one developing in unique directions based on their local conditions. It's both beautiful and unsettling. Beautiful because it means Earth's legacy could spread throughout the galaxy in a way that's sustainable, organic, truly alive. Unsettling because it means humanity's future might not include humans as we recognize them. But here's the philosophical curveball if we do this. Are we any different from whatever created 3I/Atlas? Think about it. If some civilization billions of years ago decided to seed the galaxy with life, sending out engineered biospheres to spread their biological legacy, then 3I/Atlas might not be a natural evolutionary product, it might be their version of the Genesis project. And if Earth's life was seeded by one of these ancient probes, then with a result of their experiment, which means when we talk about sending out our own biospheres, we're not starting something new, we're continuing a process that's been running for billions of years. Life seeding life, generation after generation, an unbroken chain stretching back to the first civilization that figured out how to do this. Dr. Paul Davies from Arizona State University calls this the biological universe hypothesis. He suggests, if technological civilizations inevitably discover how to create self-propagating biospheres, and if even a tiny fraction of them choose to do so, then the galaxy becomes saturated with life over geological timescales. Every star system eventually gets seeded. Life becomes not the exception, but the rule. And here's the truly wild part: we might be living through the transition point. Right now, humanity is pre-biosphere technology. We can't create 3I/Atlas-like objects yet. But in 100 years, 1000 years, we might look back at 2019, the year we discovered 3I/Atlas, as the moment we learned what was possible. The moment we saw our own potential future travelling through our solar system. It's like a message in a bottle, but the message is, this is what you could become. Do you think if we had the technology, we should send out our own biospheres? Or is that playing God on a galactic scale? Because that's the question we're going to face, sooner or later. And the answer we choose will determine not just humanity's future, but potentially the future of life throughout the galaxy. Which brings us to the most pressing question of all: what happens next? Because 3I/Atlas is already gone, fading into the darkness beyond our solar system. But if the biosphere hypothesis is correct, more are coming, and when the next one arrives, we need to be ready. Here's the hard truth: 3I/Atlas is gone, and we missed our chance. Right now, as you're listening to this, 3I/Atlas is somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit, travelling at 110,000 miles per hour into the infinite dark. By the time this video ends, it'll be another few thousand miles farther away. Every second, it's getting dimmer, fainter, harder to observe. Within a few years, it'll be too distant for even our most powerful telescopes to detect. The last meaningful observations were taken in early 2020, just before the COVID pandemic shut down most astronomical facilities. By the time research resumed at full capacity, 3I/Atlas was already fading into the cosmic background. We had roughly 6 months of quality data, 6 months to study what might be the most important biological discovery in human history. And we spent most of that time arguing about whether it was a comet. Dr. Michelle Bannister from the University of Canterbury, who tracked 3I/Atlas throughout its passage, describes the frustration perfectly We had a living alien biosphere pass through our solar system, and we treated it like a routine near-Earth object. We took some spectra, measured its brightness, and let it go. It's like having a conversation with an extraterrestrial and spending the whole time asking them to fill out a survey. But here's the thing. We didn't know what we were looking at. The data was confusing, contradictory, unprecedented. Scientists did what scientists do. They were cautious, skeptical, methodical. They wanted more observations, better data, peer review, confirmation. All the things that make science reliable also make it slow. And 3I/Atlas didn't wait. So what now? Well, we're not completely helpless. There are missions being proposed ambitious, expensive, probably never getting funded missions to intercept the next interstellar visitor. The European Space Agency has a concept called Comet Interceptor, originally designed to visit a pristine comet from the Oort cloud. But after Oumuamua and 3I/Atlas, they've redesigned it to be capable of rapid deployment to intercept interstellar objects. The spacecraft would sit at a gravitationally stable point in space, a Lagrange point waiting for the next visitor. When one appears, it launches, matches velocity, and conducts close-up observations for weeks or months instead of the brief flyby we got with 3I/Atlas. Launch date optimistically 2029, more realistically 2032 or later, and that's if funding comes through, which is always uncertain. NASA has something even more ambitious on the drawing board, Project Lyra. This isn't just an interceptor, it's a high-speed chase mission using solar gravity assists and advanced propulsion to actually catch up to objects that have already left our solar system. In theory, a Lyra-class mission launched in the 2030s could reach Oumuamua by the 2050s, or 3I/Atlas by the 2060s Doctor. Marshall Eubanks, from the Initiative for Interstellar Studies, who's been working on Project Lyra designs, is simultaneously excited and realistic. We have the technology to do this. Solar sails, ion drives, gravity assists, all proven concepts. What we don't have is the political will to fund a 40-year mission to study an object most people have never heard of. But if the biosphere hypothesis gains acceptance, that might change. 40 years. That's how long it would take to catch something we let slip away in 2019. Think about that. People born today would be middle-aged by the time we got close-up photos. But there's another approach. We don't chase 3I/Atlas. We wait for the next one. If Dr. Caleb Schaff's estimates are right, if there are hundreds of millions of these objects drifting through the galaxy, then statistically, we should detect another interstellar visitor every few years. We've already seen 3 Oumuamua in 2017, 2I/Borisov in 2019, 3I/Atlas in 2019. That's 3 in 2 years, though admittedly we got lucky with the timing. As our detection systems improve, we should spot them earlier, from farther away, giving us more time to prepare. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which began operations in 2024, can scan the entire visible sky every few nights. It's specifically designed to catch fast-moving objects, including interstellar visitors. Dr. Kat Volk from the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory estimates that with Rubin Observatory online, we should detect 5 to 10 interstellar objects per year. Most will be boring rocks. But if even 1 in 10 shows signs of being a unified biosphere, we're looking at a potential discovery every year or two. The next decade is going to be wild, Volk predicts. We're going from a period where interstellar objects were theoretical curiosities to a period where we'll be cataloguing them regularly. And if the 3I/Atlas analysis is correct, some of those objects will be alive. We're entering an era where discovering alien life becomes routine. That's either the most exciting thing imaginable or the most terrifying, depending on your perspective. So here's the timeline we're looking at. Between now and 2030, we're probably going to detect dozens more interstellar objects. By 2035, if funding comes through, we might have an interceptor mission capable of close-up study. By 2040, we could have definitive proof of the biosphere hypothesis images, samples, direct analysis of a living object from another star system. Or we could fumble this opportunity the same way we fumbled 3I/Atlas. We could underfund the missions, deprioritize the research, let bureaucratic inertia and budget constraints make the decisions instead of scientific importance. What would you prioritize, one more Mars rover or a mission to study living alien biospheres? Both are valuable, but we can't afford everything. These are the choices we're going to face. But let's say everything goes right. Let's say we intercept the next biosphere object. We study it up close. We confirm everything we suspect about 3I/Atlas. What then, Doctor? Dimitar Sasolov from Harvard asks the question that keeps astrobiologists up at night. If we confirm that wandering biospheres are common, do we have any responsibility toward them? Are they just scientific curiosities to study? Or are they in some sense alive in a way that deserves ethical consideration? Think about that for a second. If 3I/Atlas is truly a unified living system, possibly with some form of distributed awareness, then intercepting it isn't just a research mission, it's first contact. Not with a civilization, not with intelligence as we recognize it, but with life nonetheless. Do we have protocols for that? Do we have ethical frameworks? No, we don't, because we never imagined we'd need them. There's another consideration that's even more unsettling. If these biospheres are common, and if they've been travelling through the galaxy for billions of years, then Earth has almost certainly been visited by them before. Multiple times, maybe hundreds of times over geological history. Did any of them leave something behind? Did they influence Earth's biology in ways we haven't recognised? Are we, in some distant genetic sense, related to life that originated in star systems dozens or hundreds of light years away? Doctor Paul Davies suggests we should be looking for biosignatures in Earth's geological record that don't fit our evolutionary tree. Molecular fossils with chemistry that doesn't match any known organism. Organic compounds in ancient rocks with isotope ratios that suggest extraterrestrial metabolism. We've never looked for this systematically because we never had a reason to. Now we do. Imagine discovering that Earth's life isn't entirely Earth-grown, that we're part of a galactic biological network that's been operating for billions of years, spreading and mixing and evolving across countless star systems, that humanity isn't alone, we never were. We've just been looking for the wrong kind of company. On August 30th, 2019, something impossible passed through our solar system. We documented it, analysed it, and let it go. But it left us with questions that are going to reshape how we think about life, the universe, and our place in it. The next visitor is coming, maybe next year, maybe next month, and this time we'll be watching. This time we'll be ready. The universe just showed us we were asking the wrong questions. Now we know better. And the answers we find might change everything. The real story, it's just beginning.